Hi everybody and welcome to our Early Years Curriculum meeting. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mrs Conrad and I'm the Early Years lead, and along with the help of Miss Campbell and Mrs Welton, we're going to be talking you through what to expect this year in early years. My first slide is to talk about a few changes that have come into place this year. So our Early Years curriculum has actually changed. We have a new curriculum this year. We've always had a curriculum, but there have been a few tweaks and a few changes and a few things taken out. So I will be talking you through that. But we still do have our 7 areas of learning, which are broken down into 3 prime areas and 4 specific. And again, later on in this presentation, I'll be talking to you about that. We've also got 17 early learning goals. Now these are assessment points at the end of the year. So at around June time, we'll be assessing your child against 17 different early learning goals and making judgments as to whether they are emerging or expected for each of these different 17 aspects. And this will be reported to you in your child's annual report, and we will then give you further guidance around that, around that time. The last thing to mention is that we have a statutory baseline assessment that has come into place this year. Now we've always carried out a baseline assessment, but this year it is actually statutory and that's been set by the government. So you may have heard from your child that they've been counting yellow bears or pointing to different objects in a picture park, and that's all to do with our statutory baseline. And it's all carried out on an iPad and it takes around about half an hour per child. But we don't do it in one hit. We will break the assessment down into sections so it's really manageable for your child. And if you've got any concerns or queries over this, please do come and talk to one of the team. Okay, so to introduce you to our prime areas, these are broken down into 3 different sections. We've got communication and language, personal, social and emotional development, and physical. Now our prime areas really are our foundations of our curriculum, so without these in place and embedded, the rest of the curriculum just won't happen as effectively. So just to sort of break it down even further for you, communication language is all about developing spoken language, speaking and listening skills and understanding. Personal and social is all about developing healthy relationships, children understanding how to self-regulate, and understanding their self-worth. And physical is all about understanding about sort of hygiene, personal hygiene, looking out after themselves, developing those fine motor skills and gross motor skills. And these are all areas that we really have focused on a lot in the autumn term, but all year as well. These are aspects that we work on throughout the year, but particularly this half term, we're really trying to develop these sections so that the rest of the curriculum can be built upon. So to give you an idea of some of the activities that we have been teaching your children so far, so for communication language, we've been sharing treasure boxes, which are really, really great examples of how to develop speaking and listening skills. We've been teaching new and exciting vocabulary with the children. We've been sharing stories, we've been engaging in role play situations, modelling that, and it's really important also that the children are seeing us in the role play as well. So we're modelling that sort of conversation, teaching them how to have conversations, how to ask and answer questions as well with their peers. In post-personal and social, we've been helping the children to develop those really happy, healthy relationships. So again, that's us modelling how to do that. We've been teaching the children to identify their emotions and also to develop that sort of self-regulation. So when they're starting to feel a little bit frustrated or angry, it's working with them to find ways to sort of regulate that emotion and find ways of dealing with that in an appropriate manner. And also to learn how to look after their bodies, so that's healthy eating, looking after their personal needs independently, and how to understand their sort of self-worth. And in physical, we've been providing lots of different activities here, so that's through gross and fine motor. So outside, we've had the brooms out, we've had Play-Doh out for sort of that fine motor, we've had lots of activities where they've been sort of balancing and developing their core, and particularly in the sort of latter part of this half term, we've got some balance bike sort of sessions happening. So that's going to be teaching the children how to use the balance bikes to really develop that sort of core strength, and also helping them with that sort of self-care side of things. So that's the sort of hand washing, toileting independently, and sort of looking after their health. Okay, so my next slide is all about the specific areas which are made up of literacy, mathematics, understanding the world and expressive art and design. And it's just a quick note to say also that at the end of the year you will be told whether your child has reached a good level of development, sometimes known as GLD, and this is whether they have reached the expected standard in all of the prime areas plus literacy and mathematics. But understanding the world and expressive art and design are not included in that, so they don't have to necessarily get expected level in that to get their good level of development. Obviously we want them to get their expected level, but those two areas are not part of GLD. So in terms of literacy and mathematics, we will be discussing that in a bit more depth later, so I'm not going to go over that, but you can obviously have a read of the sort of curriculum overview there. But just to now talk about understanding the world and expressive art design. So understanding the world is all about understanding the physical world, the community, understanding really important members of society such as police officers, firefighters, and listening to lots of different stories, non-fiction rhymes, to understand sort of the cultural and social side of things, and to kind of build that picture of the wider world. So just to give you an example of kind of what we've been up to so far, we've been looking at our natural world, we've been looking at seasonal changes, we've been talking about sort of autumn and what might happen. We've been exploring sort of leaves, we've been creating leaf rubbings, we've been walking around the school to kind of build up a picture of kind of our sort of wider community, so within our school. And later on in the year we will be talking about police officers and nurses, and sometimes we're lucky enough to have the fire service come in, as well as a police officer who will bring their cars in. So that's really, really exciting, and it's often one of my favourite aspects of the curriculum, because I just love going for nature walks and understanding more about nature. So yeah, lots of really exciting opportunities there that we'll be sort of touching upon later on in the year. And expressive art and design is all about developing children's sort of artistic awareness, and it sort of encompasses art, drama, role play, construction as part of expressive art and design, singing. So again, lots of opportunities of that, and particularly near sort of Christmas time, we'll be starting our early years nativity, which is a real highlight of the year, where your children will be learning songs and learning dances and taking part in some acting. So that's an absolutely amazing part of expressive art and design, and something for you guys to look forward to. And something I think, this is an aspect that I think we really excel in early years, because children are so creative. We're giving them opportunities to develop their creativity, come up with their own ideas, evaluate their work, and yeah, when you come in to have a look at their learning journals, you'll see the amazing artwork that they produce. And also keep an eye out on Class Dojo, because we do post lots of sort of role play observations or singing observations, so do keep your eyes peeled for that. Okay, so moving on to reading, and in this section I'm going to be talking to you all about what to expect at school. So very shortly your child will be given their very first reading book and reading diary, which will remain in your child's book bag, and there's a good reason for this. That's because we will read with your child at school, and then it's so we can then put it in that book bag and you can then read with them at home, and it just helps us if it stays in that book bag. Your child will have one practice book and one colour band book, and we will explain what that means in a minute. And your child will read regularly with a member of staff. So this might be through one-to-one reads, group reads, phonics or reading activities. But just to mention that we will record in your child's reading diary when they've read with us, but we might not record every single reading opportunity. So they will be reading every day, but it might be that you're only seeing those one-to-one reads recorded. And our other job is to foster a love of reading. So that is through reading with your children regularly, visiting our school library, lots and lots of book talk, talking about authors, talking about our favourite parts in books, and then just encouraging that love of reading. And that is something that you can do at home. So at home, we'd also like you to regularly read with your child. So that's reading as much as you can, and that's sharing school books, old favourites from your book box at home, visiting the library, reading to your child, so they don't have to necessarily always read to you, you can read to them. Spotting familiar logos, if you're out shopping and they're looking for different logos they might recognise, that's still a reading opportunity. And we'd also like you to write in your child's reading diary when you have read with them. That's really, really helpful because that will just help us to know where you have got up to in a book, or any comments that you might have made when reading with your child. And again, we'll go into more depth in that in a minute. So just to give you an overview of our end of the year reading expectations, these are the early learning goals that I spoke about earlier. These are what we will be assessing your child against at the end of the year, so about June time, and we'll be talking to you about whether your child is emerging or expected for these different areas. For those of you with older children, you might remember we used to comment on whether they were exceeding for different areas, which has been removed this year. That's a change. So we won't be reporting that. It will just be whether they have met the early learning goal or not, in which case then we will be going through next steps with you. But just to talk to you about reading, we've got two different early learning goals. So we've got comprehension and word reading. So for comprehension, children at the expected level of development will demonstrate an understanding of what has been read to them by retelling stories and narratives using their own words and recently introduced vocabulary. Anticipate where appropriate key events and stories. Use and understand recently introduced vocabulary during discussions about stories, non-fiction, rhymes and poems, and during role play. And then for the early learning goal related to word reading, children at the expected level of development will say a sound for each letter in the alphabet and at least 10 digraphs, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute. Read words consistent with their phonic knowledge by sound blending. Read aloud simple sentences and books that are consistent with their phonic knowledge, including some common exception words. So this is all what we will be expecting your children to be doing by sort of June time. And there are lots of different things that we'll be putting in place in school to get them there. But the one thing that you can do at home to really help to encourage your child to read and to help them to reach these early learning goals is to read as much as possible. That is really, really important.
Oh, hi everyone, I'll just move my Teletubby bubble. So this is the introduction to how we teach reading in reception, and indeed how we teach the reading throughout Key Stage 1 as well, so years 1 and 2. So we use a scheme from the DFE called Letters and Sounds, and basically it splits the learning of reading into different phases, different sections. And we've already started on phase 1 with the children, and that is purely based on listening skills, so their auditory skills. So we work on, can the children spot rhyming words, particularly not spot, listen, hear rhyming words when we're reading stories, etc. Can they identify words that start with the same sound? And it is all completely based on their oral skills as opposed to reading. Once we feel confident that the children are beginning to develop and secure those skills, we then move on to teaching them phase 2, which is where we start showing them and introducing them to our single letter sounds. And these are the orange sounds that you can see on the screen here. We have got some double sounds there. We call them special friends, saying that there's 2 letters but they make 1 sound and it's the same sound. Once the children are secure with phase 2 and can recall those sounds, we then move on to phase 3, which you can see there, and that introduces digraphs, which are sounds that there's 2 letters but they make 1 sound, and a couple of trigraphs there, which are sounds where there's 3 letters but again they make 1 sound. So that's the process that we follow in reception. And it's also the process that is followed in year 1. So it's a very smooth transition from reception into year 1 with their reading journey. We will not move the children on until they're ready, but we do also teach the children how to blend sounds together, so that's the core of learning to read. So for example, when we're looking at phase 2, we might start looking at SAT, SAT, and then we will teach the children words that contain those letters, those sounds, and show them how to read them, how to blend those sounds together to make the word. So, a typical phonics session in reception is really active. We know that that is what engages children the most, and it lasts around 15 to 20 minutes each day, normally in the morning when the children are at their sort of most receptive for phonics. And it's really practical. We always start with teaching and reviewing the previous taught sounds, and then we introduce the new sound through sort of fun activities, through actions that accompany that sound, and then games that are kind of applying what they've learned, and there's just some examples there. Now, alongside teaching the children to read through phonics, we will also be providing the children with books to go in their book bags. And initially you will see 2 books from the school in their book bag. The first one will be a colour band book. This is just a book that they can read at home with you and share with sort of anyone in the household. Now, these books are banded, so they are differentiated according to ability. We start off at pink, and you can see the graduation there. Now, they are tailored as much as possible to child's ability, so you'll find that most children in reception will start on pink books. There still will be sounds, and particularly in the early days, that they don't know, so there may be they can't read majority of the words in their pink books, and that's absolutely fine, and that's where we would just encourage you to read to them and see if they can identify individual sounds, even if you're saying what the word is. Now, we have another book that we will be popping into book bags very soon. These are called practice books. Now, these are very different in so much that they are more individually tailored to your child's ability in phonics and their current stage. So it's much more precise. These books you will note because they'll have the big purple lion at the top. They're called Colin's Big Cat Phonics, and they will have a sticker on them that says practice books. Now, it's these books that we will be reading with the children in their one-to-one sessions in school. We won't be reading with the children via the colour bands books, we will be reading with the practice books because of having that really close association with their phonics level. Now, these books are just remembered, you may not see them in book bags straight away. We've just put in a massive order. We're still awaiting the books to be delivered. So initially you may just see that we've got the colour band book in your child's book bag, and that's absolutely fine. And as soon as we get the practice books, obviously you'll start to see them in book bags too. And they're books that we change regularly. Both books we encourage the children to change as soon as kind of they've read the book, maybe once or twice, where they've really understood not only the language and the reading side, but also the comprehension side. So we always encourage the children to read the books, 2-3 times, just so they really embed what they've learned and the storyline of the book, etc. But it is changed regularly. So you'll also have in your child's book bag the reading diary, and here are some just ideas about what you could write in the diary. Now, we recognise that it's really tough of an evening at times to kind of find the time to write in the diary with everything else that you have to do, sort of with dinner, bedtime routines, etc. So please don't feel under any pressure to write in the book every single time that you read with your child. As and when you can is great. And it may be that you comment on your child's enjoyment of the story. It may be that you comment on their kind of sounding out ability and recognition of the sounds that they've learned once we're further along the phonics into the half term. So please feel free to have a look and use some of these ideas to support your recording in the diary. I will also say that the reading diary is not just for school provided books. If you go to the library and there's a particular book that your child loves and you've read with them, even if they're looking at a recipe book with you or a manual for something, anything that is related to reading and that you share with them, that they don't necessarily have to be able to read themselves, please pop it in the diary if you get a moment, because it just gives that picture of real breadth of reading and exposure to different kinds of texts. So it isn't just for the school books.
Unfortunately, everyone, this is Miss Campbell here. My camera has given up the ghost, but that's fine. Hopefully you can still hear me. So here, alongside teaching the children the sounds and how to blend those sounds into words, we will also be introducing the children to what we call red words, or sometimes they're known as tricky words. And these are basically words that you can't sound out, that if you were to try and sound out each letter and then blend those sounds together, the word would not be pronounced properly. So there's some examples there for you. And again, these are introduced in phases. They normally run alongside a phase of sounds. So for example, when we're teaching the phase 2 sounds, these are the words here that we will be introducing the children to as well, and they've just got to know them by sight. So we end up literally carpet bombing the classrooms and our outdoor area with these words, so that it gets to the point where it's that instant recognition. The children will see the word no and they will straight away be able to read it as no, etc. And then you can see here again we move through the different progressions. So once the children have got this first set of 6 tricky words and they can recall them all by sight, we then move on through the following 3 sets. So that's just how we cover our red words. And then moving on, take that with me, just a bit of information really about why this is such a key part of our presentation to you and how much we value the reading at home and how it's so important. And there's just some information there that you may want to spend some time looking at about why reading at home is so important. And I would also like to point out again, it's not just reading the books that the children bring home in their book bag. It's also, you know, when you have those trips to the library, if there's a newspaper, something that's happened that they're particularly interested in, it's reading recipe books. It's just their exposure to the whole world of language is so important. And we really encourage that in school and at home as well. And here's just some statistics to really back up our passion for children becoming avid readers with a real deep love of books that lasts with them through their lifetime, and just the importance of really reading at home as well as learning sort of the nuts and bolts of reading at school. And it's all about what reading gives children. Particularly it gives them a really vast language base, and that's a real big emphasis, particularly since the pandemic, is making sure that our youngest children, you know, aren't left behind in terms of the vocabulary that they're exposed to and what they sort of take on board. So there's just some statistics for you there, just to underpin everything that we do in school. And you can see there the last one is particularly poignant, that children who are reading outside of school are more likely to be reading above their expected level for their age. So that's why it is such an important skill to develop in school and to completely celebrate and enjoy at home as well.
Okay, so moving on to writing. So these are our end of year writing expectations, otherwise known as our early learning goals. So children at the expected level of development, and we're talking again about sort of by June time, they will be writing recognisable letters, most of which are correctly formed, spell words by identifying sounds in them and representing sounds with a letter or letters, and write simple phrases and sentences that can be read by others. And I'm going to talk you through what that might look like in a minute. And there's a little bit at the bottom there that you might not have seen, which says readers become writers. And I think that's really important just to highlight, because reading and writing are completely interlinked. These two curriculum areas work so closely together. We often find that children who are really confident readers are also really confident writers. The more we can promote reading at home and at school and develop that sort of love of reading, we often see that writing will develop really quickly too. So that's just something to bear in mind. If your child maybe is a little bit more reluctant writer to start with, encouraging that reading and really promoting that side of things will often then lead into writing as well. Okay, so applying phonic knowledge to their writing. Here you can see a bit of a progression of writing. So once children are past that mark making stage, which to some people might look a bit like a scribble, but actually it's a really important stage of writing, and it's something that we really do encourage and promote in early years. So once they're past that stage and are ready to write, you might see some of this in their work. So for number one here, we've got the initial sound, so that's in the word cat. So once children are hearing those dominant sounds, they might start writing it. It then moves on to initial and end sounds for number two. And then number three, we call a CVC word, a consonant, vowel, consonant word. And once they're at this point, we can really start thinking that they're ready to then progress into writing phrases and sentences, where you can see number 4, 5 and 6. And the end goal is essentially number 6, where we've got a complete sentence with a full stop capital letter. Although the full stop and capital letter isn't part of our early learning goal, this is something we really do feel is quite important, so we do teach it at Summerlea. And it would be great if you could encourage that at home. Now, it's really important that we encourage children to write for a range of purposes. So it might be writing lists, it might be writing cards, it might be writing stories, it might be writing a letter for a friend. And it's really important at home that you're also encouraging writing as much as possible. And also that your child is seeing you as a writer. So if you're writing a shopping list, it's great for your child to watch you doing that. They find it fascinating anyway. And also get them involved. So if there are words on your shopping list that they could easily stand out, encourage them to do that, encourage them to have a go. So if you need to buy some eggs, this is a really great one, because children can easily sound out eggs at the beginning and they could have a go at writing that. Particularly at the moment, we're really promoting name writing as well. So with Christmas coming up, you could encourage your child to write some Christmas cards for you, have a go at writing their name. And there are lots of other ways you can make writing exciting at home. So you can do some sensory writing, you can get the shaving foam out, and a really easy way of doing this is to put it in the bath, because then you can wash it away, and just encourage your child to use their finger to mark make or to write. You can ask them to write in some sand, so you can just put some sand in a tray and get them just to use their finger again to mark make, or the end of a wooden spoon. Rice is another really easy one. Or sticks in mud. So there's lots of different ways that you can promote really exciting writing opportunities. So in phonics, just to give you a bit of an overview on how we would get the children to this stage, when we start phonics, we encourage them to start hearing sounds in words, and we call that segmenting. So for example, with the word cat, we would begin by asking the children to show us their phoneme fingers or their sound fingers. So we would say, show us 3 sound fingers or phoneme fingers, and then we would say, right, let's sound out the word cat. And then we'd all go, k-at, and then that's called segmenting. And then if your child is reading a word, so if they're looking at the screen like we are now, and we ask them to sound out cat, and they go, k-at, which is segmenting, and then they're blending it, so they can go, oh, cat, they've blended those sounds. That's also really, really important. So the child needs to be able to segment and blend in order to write. So if you've got any questions about this, do come and speak to one of the team. But it's just as much writing as you possibly can, as much reading as you possibly can, and hopefully we will get them all to stage 6.
So moving on to maths. Oh, I'm trying to move on to maths, but it doesn't want to move on. On the next slide, we have the end of year expectations for maths. So the early learning goals, as they are now on our new curriculum. I'm trying to move myself so I'm not covering them up. Here we are. You'll see there aren't many early learning goals that children have to achieve, and our focus is on the breadth, on the depth of their understanding of those numbers. So although we focus mainly on numbers to 10 with some to 20, we really need such a deep understanding in what those numbers are and what they mean in their relationship to each other. So that is our focus this year. And the way we will achieve that is through lots of physical use of equipment. It will be mainly play-based. We use lots of different resources. We focus on subtizing, which is that understanding of what a number is without having to count it, to recognise it without counting how many there are each time. And again, on the bottom here, you'll see we're going for the depth of understanding, not the breadth. So it doesn't matter if we can count 30, 50, 100. We're looking at how deeply we understand those numbers up to 10 and up to 20. Here's some examples of ways that we might be using resources to deepen the children's understanding of number. So plenty of physical activities, things that the children can hold, touch, move, count, and get used to the representations in different ways. Although it's no longer an early learning goal, we will be teaching shape, space and measures this half term because we feel it's such an important part of the children's development. So again, there'll be lots of concrete resources, it'll be play-based, and lots of exploration using shapes in different contexts. And here's some more examples of how we've done that in previous years. I'll just move my head out of the way. Lots of physical, lots of playing, play-based activities, and lots of ways to explore using shapes.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this presentation. We completely appreciate it's an awful lot for you to take in, so do please come and speak to one of us if you have any questions. Thank you so much.